All right, folks, welcome in to Pickaxe and Roll, brought to you by our good friends over at BetOnline. I am your host, Ryan Blackburn at NBA Blackburn on Twitter, part of the Mile High Sports Podcast Network, and I'm excited to talk about Nikola Jokic, the Lord of Denver, who is just like he's on an all-time run. There's no question about it, and the fact that I can even ask the question that's at the title of this podcast: what happens if he wins a fourth MVP? Is ludicrous. It is crazy, but I am very excited to get into it, get into all the ramifications for this 20Q episode, the 11th 20Q preview episode for the 2024-25 Denver Nuggets season. I am your host, Ryan Blackburn. As I mentioned, thank you so much for tuning into the show. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button if you can. Would greatly appreciate it. Really quickly, this podcast is brought to you by the good folks over at BetOnline, your number one source for everything NFL. Make sure to get in on their $200,000 MegaContest and pick 5 games against the spread every single week for your chance at weekly prizes and a share of the $200K. They are the most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. Have every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads to bet on during the games. Head on over to the website today to get in on the action. BetOnline, the game starts here. All right, let's talk about Nikola Jokic. Let's talk about a truly incredible player, somebody who has changed the lives of pretty much everybody involved here, which is kind of wild to think about. I would not be in the position that I am today if not for Jokic, I don't think. I am fortunate enough to be having a podcast platform, to be having a ability to talk about the Denver Nuggets, and the Nuggets wouldn't pay the bills the way that they are currently doing with Jokic here. I think back to a couple of things that came out about Steph Curry and how much he increased the valuation of the Golden State Warriors during his career, during this entire time. And it's just a fascinating conversation. The way that he has impacted just about everything in my individual life is kind of wild, kind of crazy to see. And I've been able to go to see him raise a championship trophy, to raise 3 separate MVP trophies. The first one in 2021 was incredible. It was, I think, the validation that Nuggets fans needed, especially during COVID, where everybody and their mother kept telling people that, oh, there's no way Jokic is that good. There's no way he's that good. And then he was that good. And it wasn't until the second one when people, they really start to get into the feeling of, could Jokic actually be not just great, but maybe an all-time great player? But it wasn't until he didn't win MVP in the 2023 season when it was very clear. It was clear to most people before this, but clear basically universally that he was the best player in the NBA and clearly a top-tier Pantheon-level player. When it's all said and done, he just needs the time. He just needs the overall length of a career in order to grow in those avenues. And then he won another one this last year. I did not expect him to win it. I thought that there was really no way that he could possibly win it, followed up what he had done previously. I thought that he would take a step off the gas. I did not expect him to increase his workload. He played the most minutes of his career, carried a heavy usage rate, was just doing everything for this Nuggets team, and was a better defensive player than many of his MVP seasons. Or not many, but a couple, like the other 2. And it was just fascinating to see how, he won 3 in 4 years. That seems impossible. It seems impossible, and yet, he did it. He was able to make it happen. And it has truly changed how I view, he has changed how I view the game. Watching through the lens of Jokic has made me a smarter commentator, I think. It's made me a smarter analyst. I think it's made the Nuggets, obviously, a better, smarter team. And he's truly changed the game with the way that he can facilitate from the big man position, but also just turning what are low value shots into high value shots in different ways, having the touch that no big in history can match, including Kareem Abdul-Jabbar with the skyhook. This is just a truly impressive player heading into his 10th NBA season, and there's no reason why he can't win another MVP because the team, as it is currently constructed, might need him to have another MVP caliber season in order to be a top 4 seed, let alone top 3 or top 2 or the best team in the West. So, without further ado, let's talk about just some of the shift that's going to happen here and what's going to actually happen in order to make him capable of being another MVP and getting his 4th MVP in 5 seasons. I'm curious to see what everybody else thinks, but I'm going to share my opinions on this matter, and I'm curious to see what ultimately becomes of this season of Nikola Jokic. So strap in, let's talk about it. I'm going to do 3 segments today. Should be a lot of fun for the most part. First segment. Only 2 players in NBA history have won 4 MVPs in 5 seasons. First is LeBron James back in 2009 and then to 2013. He missed the year in between when Derrick Rose won, but there were a lot of people that argued that LeBron should have won in that case. Sound familiar? But then Bill Russell also won 3 MVPs in a row and then won a separate one in a 5-year span. And that's it. That's it. Those are the only 2 players in the entire NBA's history to win 4 MVPs in 5 seasons. There have been other players that have won 4 MVPs. Jordan obviously did it. He had 2 before leaving for baseball and then 2 after. Obviously, Kareem won a bunch of MVPs. Other guys have won 3. Wilt, I think, won 4, if I'm not mistaken, but it wasn't close enough. There have been others that have been close. Magic won 3. Larry won 3. Moses won 3. But very few have ever won 4. And to maintain that level of individual dominance for that long, while the team is good enough to actually earn credit for it, is just next to impossible. It's something that I don't think anybody could really have possibly fathomed would come from Jokic. But he's at it again. There's a very strong case that he's at it again. I've posted this graphic before. Let me just make sure that this goes to the correct place. I've posted this graphic before. Highest box plus minus over a 300-game span. This doesn't include Kareem. It doesn't include Wilt. It doesn't include some other guys before that. But what Jokic has done over the course of these last 4 years is truly undeniable, truly unbelievable. And you can see it even more with the fact that he is ranked 2nd in the entire NBA in MVP odds in the 2024-25 season. Luka, obviously up here, he has been at the top of these kinds of lists over the course of the last few years. I think in each of the years that Jokic has won or come second, Luka has been favored. I think everybody expects Luka to eventually break through, and it just would not surprise me if that happened. SGA, obviously, his odds are not actually, that should not say plus 800. That should say, oh gosh, what should that say? That number is wrong. Plus 450. So between Luka plus 375, Nikola Jokic at plus 400, and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander at plus 450, those are the 3 kind of candidates to win MVP this season, the 3 primary candidates. Luka's the favorite, but it's close enough that I think everybody expects that it could go one direction or the other. And then Joel Embiid is 4th on this list at plus 750, and Giannis is at plus 800, which should not surprise anybody at all. When those guys are healthy, they're candidates. That's just plain and simple. They just haven't been healthy or haven't been as dynamic as you would expect in Giannis's case in some of those different aspects. But so you take a look at that list, and I think I would kind of bet against Jokic to actually get it. And there's a couple of reasons why. The Nuggets are expected to regress a little bit. I don't think anybody's really predicting them to get a top 2 seed again. They could be a 3 seed, but I've seen people have them as low as like 5 or 6 in the Western Conference, which is wild. There have been a lot of conversations that have not had them as a championship contender. I don't think that's true, but I do think that there's at least a court of public opinion that is expecting the Nuggets to take a step back. And if the Nuggets win 52 games as opposed to the 57 they won last year, then it feels different. It feels, and so much of MVP is about feel and narrative and just the timing of things. And so it just wouldn't surprise me if Joker kind of fell back behind that. And then if everybody's healthy, like on all teams and Dallas outwins Denver, I just think that people are going to want to give it to Luka. And that's fine. Like Luka is an all-time player as well. He hasn't won one yet. It would not surprise me if he was like seen as this being his year. He went to the finals last year with Dallas, has been an undeniable statistical darling over the course of these past couple of years. Like he is in line to get one. And there's a reason why the odds are the way that they are. SGA probably be on a 60 plus win team. So it just wouldn't surprise me if he was leading the races. If like hypothetically, let's say his assist numbers go up, they were a little bit low last year, and he's still averaging over 30 points per game, and he's still averaging a crazy amount of steals. Like, all right, now you're really starting to have to make arguments about why he's not the MVP in that case. It's not a Jason Tatum situation where clearly the supporting cast around him is undeniable with Jaylen Brown, Drew Holiday, Derek White. Yes, there are awesome players on OKC, but there's one alpha dog over there. There's not two, and it is Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. And then obviously you have Embiid and Giannis, and they've won MVPs before. I don't expect them to win again. I don't think that Embiid will be healthy enough to win again, but I could be wrong. And like hypothetically, he plays 65 games. He's been a per-minute MVP in a variety of seasons, so I'm not really a surprise at that point. So what would it take actually for Jokic to win the MVP again? This is the list that I came up with, and we could talk about it a little bit. Top 3 seed, I think, is mandatory. I think that's something that he's going to need. Yes, he won an MVP when he was a 6 seed, but that was a very special case where Giannis and Embiid's seasons weren't as strong as I think people remember. And Jokic was clearly the best player per minute that season and carrying the Nuggets at that point. Jokic would have to play another 75 plus regular season games, I think. Maybe there's some wiggle room there to like 73 or 74. But once you get down to 72 and you say you've missed 10 games, in the NBA now where you've got the 65 game rule, those games do matter. Each of those incrementally do matter, especially when you get to 10 plus games missed. So we'll see whether he can play that. Nothing about Jokic says that he will miss any more than about 10 to 12 regular season games. But I think that if he really wants to get the MVP, it's going to have to be fewer than 7 games missed. And he's going to need another incredible season, obviously, by the numbers. Usually his numbers are just undeniable and incredible. But there have been times where, okay, he in 2022-23, he only averaged 24, 23 points per game, somewhere in that range. His efficiency numbers were through the roof, but there was a vast difference at that point between what Embiid was averaging from a points perspective and what Jokic was averaging. So I'm not surprised that he didn't get it that year, even though he was clearly having a great, undeniable season. So he's got to have an incredible season by the numbers. It's probably going to be 26, 12 and 9, 26, 13 and 8, 28, 12 and 10. You get up into those territories again, and he qualifies. Pretty much every season is an insane season by the numbers for Jokic, of course. Number 4, another insane on-off differential. Jokic, that's one of the points that he generally makes from consistently having these undeniable on-offs where you could see the value that he's putting out there on the floor. If he and the Nuggets are plus 12 when he's on the floor and then they're minus 12 when he's off the floor, no other player can match that. part of that is not necessarily Jokic is doing, because a lot of the times Denver's bench has not been good enough, and they've actually propped up that on-off differential in some seasons. That's not like an intentional thing, but it's just kind of a byproduct of the way that the rotations and the rosters have been built. And then number 5, if there is very little progression from the supporting cast to the point where, yeah, Murray doesn't like have an all-star caliber season, Porter doesn't step up, Christian Brown looks meh, and then Jokic still has his crazy numbers and the Nuggets are still a top 3 seed, I think that that is one where you are very clearly going to see people argue for Jokic, and rightly so. Like, when he takes on that much of a burden, it's not a surprise when he's at that place and where he's at the top of all these MVP lists. People might not like it, but it is a real thing. Derp Jones says, and thank you for the $2. Derp Jones says, true triple-double average with a top 4 seed. How sick would that be, by the way? Just like, he was very, very close to the triple-double average in 2022-23. Only missed it by like 0.5, 0.6 assists, I think. But he was flirting with it for a long time. If he actually had 10 plus assists and like a round number, 10 plus assists, people would get very, very interested in what that looks like. So that would be a wow stat line for sure. For sure. Okay. Would I bet on Jokic winning the MVP? Probably not. I would probably split votes between Luka and SGA. That would be like, I just think it's probably Luka's time. If he is like, if the Mavericks are winning 50 plus and the Nuggets win about 50, 52, I just think that people are going to want to give it to him. And if not him, then it's probably going to SGA, where they're going to win 60 plus games, the OKC Thunder are, and there's a clear leader in that clubhouse for why they are doing it. So if that happens, then I'd probably assume the voters give it to those guys, even if Jokic, statistically, with analytics or whatever numbers you want to throw out there, if he has the best numbers, it might not matter this year. But if he did win, probably solidify him as a top 10 player ever. 4 plus MVPs, Bill Russell, Wilt Chamberlain, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Michael Jordan, LeBron James. Pretty good list. When we come back, we are going to chat about why the Nuggets may not want Nikola Jokic to win another MVP. It wouldn't surprise me if they decided, yeah, you know what? Let's get away from that. We'll talk about that on the other side. We'll be right back on Mile High Sports. All right, we're back. Pickaxe and Roll. Ryan Blackburn here. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Would really appreciate it for sure. Let's pull this back up again, just this list, because I think this is important to look at from the other side of things, right? Top 3 seed. It's very possible that Denver doesn't need a top 3 seed in order to win the NBA Finals. I've done this analysis before. Usually, if you are a top 3 seed, you have the best chance to win a championship. That is something that happens. That's a very real thing. Unfortunately for the Nuggets, like, yes, they should absolutely want a top 3 seed, but it's not necessary to win a title, even if it is a strong indicator. We've seen other teams win when they are not a top 3 seed, but usually teams that are just really great in the regular season are also really great in the playoffs, and that is where that trend happens. Actually, no, let me step back before I get too deep into this. Obviously, Nuggets fans should want Jokic to be an MVP. Like, let me get this off the screen, actually. Nuggets fans should want Jokic to be an MVP. There's no doubt in my mind that they should want that to happen for him and for kind of history's sake. I think people would love to know that they are rooting for a top 10 player of all time. And you, as a Nuggets fan, might already believe that Jokic is a top 10. Maybe he's top 5. Maybe he's the best player you've ever watched in your life. And you have your right to believe that. Other people are going to argue against Jokic if he doesn't have the requisite number of MVPs, rings, all NBAs, impact culturally, things like that. Like there's a lot of things that would stop people from crediting Jokic. But the larger the resume is from an award standpoint, the harder it is to argue against it. There's a lot of people that will argue that Jokic is a worse player than Dirk Nowitzki. It's really hard to argue that if Jokic has a second MVP, has three, or not a MVP, has a second finals MVP and a fourth regular season MVP. Like it's just the amount of players that have ever done that before are so limited. It's so small. So Nuggets fans should obviously want as many awards for their players as possible. They want the credit for those guys. And when you get the opportunity as a Nuggets fan to say that you watched a top 10 player of all time, one of the best players ever, play for your team, you should absolutely want that. That is insane. But I think that there's a better pathway for Jokic to be a top 10 player than simply winning MVPs. Let's go to Cedric Super Chat here real quick. Cedric says, thank you for the 199. Is Yoke a nug for life? My B-day is soon, by the way, Ryan. Happy early birthday. Absolutely. You deserve it, my friend. Make sure to celebrate. Make sure to do positive things. I believe the Joker will be a Nugget for life. I think that that's one thing that he has wanted to push forward. I think he's always wanted to be around the Nuggets organization. He wants to be the Tim Duncan of the Nuggets franchise, maybe even the Steph Curry of the Nuggets franchise, the Michael Jordan, although Mike did go to the Washington Wizards at the end of his career. That's kind of a separate thing. I think that he will be a Nugget for life. I do not have any reason to believe that he would leave. Circumstances can change down the line. His contract, like he has 3 full years left and then a player option in the 4th year. Maybe something changes at that point, and that's why these next 3 to 4 years are so very important for the Nuggets organization. So ask me again after this upcoming season, and I might have a different opinion to tell you based off of whether it's things that I've heard or anything else. But I do think the Joker will be a Nugget for life, and that really helps with the legacy conversation, of course. So hopefully it's all good. But yeah, let me reiterate. It would take a lot for Joker to win a 4th MVP. I don't want to put the cart before the horse. He might have a great season, and it might not mean anything. Or not mean anything, but it might not mean an MVP at the end of it, because he could do all the things that I listed here. Top 3 seed, 75+ regular season games, incredible numbers, incredible on-off differential, and then no all-star around him, no real development from the young guys, surprising development. And Denver could not win enough games. And let's say they win 50. Dallas wins 52. Luka's probably getting the MVP if he's healthy enough. Same thing for SGA. He's probably less likely, but I do think that it is possible. But just going through this, like I talked about with the top 3 seed, Denver doesn't need a top 3 seed in order to win a title. It's a good thing if they get it, but Denver should not be straining themselves too much in order to try to make it happen. The Nuggets should also probably not want Jokic to play 75+ games in another 2,737 minutes. Here are the minute totals that Joker has played throughout his NBA career so far. 1733, 2038, 2443, 2504, 2336, 2488, 2476, 2323, 2737. So outside of the first 2 seasons where he was still integrating himself into the Nuggets lineup, he has played at least 2,300 minutes every single year. And that kind of wear and tear, it builds. It's something that is going to ultimately slow him down in the coming seasons. And Nuggets fans have to get ready for that. It's coming. Now, it may not be immediate. It may not be something that's like a stark difference. You might not notice it initially until maybe 3, 4, 5 years down the line, but it'll happen. So lessening the burden on Jokic should be the goal for the franchise and freeing him up for playoff runs and for championships and not necessarily doing everything in the regular season to help the team win the most amount of games. Now, on number 3, the Nuggets should absolutely want incredible moments. They should absolutely want incredible stats. I don't think they should want an incredible on-off differential, though. I honestly think that Denver should be looking towards improving the non-Jokic minutes in any ways that they can. They've gone a couple of different methods with that, and they've added Russell Westbrook. They've added Dario Saric. They drafted Deron Holmes, though he is out. There is a possibility that the team improves from a on-off differential standpoint without Jokic on the floor, but I do also think it's going to take some conscious thought from Michael Malone in how he structures the rotation. He can't just put Murray with 4 bench guys or Porter with 4 bench guys the entire time or go full bench and think that it's going to get that much better. Denver just doesn't have enough talent for that. They don't have enough veteran leadership and capability for that. Peyton Watson's still figuring out how to play. Julian Strawther, same thing. Vlatko Cancar is probably not good enough coming off of a torn ACL in order to make that happen. And we're still trying to figure out what to do, like what Russell Westbrook and Dario Saric are going to be. Like, there's a possibility that they're great. There's a possibility that they're not. And then that number 5, that little progression from the supporting cast, the Nuggets should absolutely want the progression from the supporting cast to take away some of the burden from Jokic. He doesn't have to do everything at that point. They should want Murray to become an all-star, given that they just paid him over $200 million. They should want Michael Porter taking a responsibility and usage leap, something that where he can sort of take on more playmaking responsibility and not have Jokic do everything with the lineup when Murray isn't out there, for example. And then Christian Brown, Julian Strawther, Peyton Watson, you want those guys to get better. You don't want them to stagnate. You want them to take some pressure off of Jokic. And then Saric especially. You want him to find a way to anchor some of those bench units. Zeke Naji last year was averaging about 10 minutes per game. That is not good enough if you want to save Jokic minutes. You want to make sure that Jokic is playing about 32 minutes a game and not 34, because if you do that over a course of 75 games, that's 150 minutes that you've saved for the playoffs. So these are the margins. They're all important margins, but these are the margins that Jokic and the Nuggets need to have in order to be better. If Jokic wins another MVP, it's probably because like the things on the screen happen, and it's probably because a combination of the things that I discussed did not happen. And he was forced to shoulder a heavy burden. He was forced to carry the group again. You don't want that. You want Jokic to feel like he can take a step back. You want more 10, 10, and 10 games. Like you don't want a whole bunch of 20, like 30, 20, and 10s or anything like that. 30, 15, 15. They are great for stats. They're great for making arguments on Twitter when you get to say Jokic is the only player to ever do this. I've done that as well. I'm doing that now. But what I will say is you want to make sure to save him as long as you possibly can. Because is it conducive to winning in the playoffs if Jokic is grinding during the regular season, making sure he's at his tip-top shape during that point, as opposed to tip-top shape in April and May? Probably not. Let's take another break. When we come back, we are going to discuss how long the Nuggets have with Jokic playing at this particular level. And this is one where people are going to get maybe a little bit uncomfortable. Hopefully not. Hopefully this is like people can understand that I'm doing this for the understanding of what expectations for Nikola Jokic are. But this is going to be a fascinating conversation. We'll be right back on Pickaxe and Roll. All right. Final segment, Pickaxe and Roll. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. Let's go over how much longer do the Nuggets have with Jokic playing at this level of Jokic. And let me throw this graphic back up here, as I am one to do. Not this one, this one. This is unprecedented levels of production, of efficiency, of effectiveness. What Jokic has done over the course of the last 4 years, it's undeniable. It's great. It's tremendous. And yet folks should be at least a little concerned that he could be gassing out. He could be ultimately, when the time comes for these next few years, like how long is he going to be able to keep that up or that up? It's a lot. And asking him to do that would be insane. So I wanted to do this statistically. I wanted to come up with something where I could say, hey, Jokic is entering year 10. And by the way, good Lord, it has gone very fast. As I mentioned at the top of this podcast, like I've covered him for a long time. I've got to see the highs and lows. But I remember when he was a rookie. I remember when he was just jumping into the lineup when they were trying to make Jokic and Nurkic work together. What were they called initially? It was the lineup with Jokic and Nurkic. Did they call it like the Twin Towers? Like, is that what they were doing? Because it was not that, obviously. The Eastern European Bash Bros, something like that. I don't know what it was, but year 10 is a long time, and there's a lot of players that have never done what Jokic has done. But one thing that I did look for, I put together a list of players that from Jokic's 4th year to 9th year, like in that 6th year kind of time period in their careers historically, achieved what Jokic just achieved. They had at least 10,000 plus minutes played, 75 plus win shares, and averaged and maintained a box plus minus of at least 7. The list of players: Michael Jordan, LeBron James, David Robinson, Chris Paul, Larry Bird, Kevin Durant, John Stockton, Steph Curry, Charles Barkley, James Harden, and Kevin Garnett. From year 4 to year 9, at least a box plus minus average of 7 and total win shares of 75 or higher. The reason why I did those two things, those are high thresholds where you have to maintain that high level of consistency and high level of effectiveness. And so I put that in this graphic here, and I called them the Pantheon Stars. This was after the merger, so I didn't include Wilt Chamberlain, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. There's a couple of guys missing here, like Tim Duncan, Kobe Bryant, your other players that you would expect to be on a list like this, Shaquille O'Neal being one of them. But I wanted to show this and make sure that everybody understood what Jokic was doing, where right now he's the yellow line on this graphic here. Year 9, 17 win shares in his career was very, very good. It's not the highest ever. Like there's been a few guys that have been upwards of 20, which is crazy. Upwards of 20. But Jokic at 17, it's the highest of his career. And he has been, over the course of these last 4 seasons or so, just tremendous. 6 to 9, 15.6, 15.2, 14.9, 17.0. It's a very high level. But it's also in line with some of the other guys that I've mentioned and some of the greatest names ever. So of those guys, you start to see the drop off right about here. We're heading into year 10, or for the Pantheon Stars at the bottom, if you're looking on YouTube, the average win shares in year 9 is 14.1. Year 10, it's 11.0. Year 11, it goes back up to 12.2 for those guys. Then it goes back down to 12.9 or 10.9, then to 10.1, then to 7, then to 6.5. You start to really see the drop off in those later years. And so I'm looking at that, and I think about the Nuggets, and I think about Jokic. How long can Jokic be a top 3 regular season playoff player like he has been over the course of the last 4 years? History says he's got about 4 more years of it. year 10 of those 11 guys that I talked about, 6 of the 11 had 10 plus win shares in a season, which means you're good and you're playing. Year 11, it went back up to 9 out of the 11. Year 12, it went to 8. Year 13, it went to 6 of the 11. Year 14, only one guy, LeBron James, was able to accomplish it. Year 15, only one of the 11 was able to accomplish it, LeBron James. It's possible that Jokic breaks that trend, that he is good enough during the latter stages of his career where he's playing, he's consistent, he's doing a whole bunch, that he actually extends his career longer than that, or his prime longer than that. It's possible that he drops off sooner. But statistically, for these top tier players, the next 4 years is probably the window. Next 4 years is what people are thinking about, which is very interesting because the Nuggets have him for 3 full seasons guaranteed and then a player option for $62 million. So he's probably going to be here for at least 4 years. There's a possibility that that's different. There's a possibility that he retires at some point. I don't know. Like, I'm just going to speculate on that, but I think that if he wanted to be, he would be great for at least the next 4. And so that puts it into perspective. The Nuggets can and should be operating on a 4-year window. These next 4 years. Jokic's last, potentially, of his career, at least at this high level. This is Jokic's 10th, 11th, 12th, and 13th seasons. Can they win outside of that year? Sure. Can they win outside of that window? Like, yeah, LeBron won when he was in, year 18? Like, year 16, 17, somewhere around there? Like, when he was with the Lakers in the bubble, 2019-20, he was still very good. Not at his prime, but he was still incredible. But this I thought was interesting. MJ's ring during The Last Dance was in his 13th season. LeBron's 2015-16 ring with the Cleveland Cavaliers was in his 13th season. Steph and his 2021-22 ring, kind of that last little hurrah for the Golden State Warriors, you guessed it, his year 13 season. David Robinson won again in year 14, but he had a guy named Tim Duncan next to him. 13 years. I think that's the number that people have to have in their mind. You don't want to be overestimating this. You don't want to be assuming that it's going to be way longer than it is, because then you will be disappointed. And so I think for the Nuggets, they have to maximize these next 4 years. It's one of the reasons why you saw KCP leave in free agency, because or why the Nuggets let him go in free agency, because they think that Christian Brown, Peyton Watson, Julian Strawther over the course of the next 4 years will be better or more important or more capable of stepping up at a cheaper price than what they would have gotten from KCP. That's at least the argument. I'm not sure if it's a good one, but that's at least something to think about with what Jokic is about. Calvin Booth once called himself the steward of the Nikola Jokic era. And so I think he's got to have this in mind, and he probably does. How do you maximize the number of championships that you can get while Jokic is at his best? This should be, I think, a sobering reality for what's going to happen over the course of these next 4 years. Jokic could absolutely be at the top of his game. He could win a 4th MVP in this upcoming season. He could win a 5th the next year. You start to get further beyond that, and it gets a little scary. So hopefully everybody has that in their heads. Hopefully everybody understands what's going on here. The Nuggets are on the clock. They have to be great, and they can't dilly-dally and mess around with this. If this was a year where it just doesn't work, if this is a wasted year because Denver let go of KCP and like the other guys just aren't ready, it's 1 year out of Jokic's prime that they are potentially missing. So my hope is that the Nuggets are ready. My hope is that everybody has or is everybody's in lockstep on this, that they should be trying to maximize the window as much as possible over the course of these next 4. And if this is the right team for it, then great. If this is not the right team for it, then Calvin Booth has to get going, or he has to get not going. He has to get working on what the next version of the team is that can win the title again, because time is running out, and it's important to understand that. Okay, folks, that is going to do it for this episode of Pickaxe and Roll, brought to you by our good friends over at BetOnline, number 38. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. Really appreciate the love and support on the podcast as always. I think I will be back tomorrow night and do a little bit of a training camp and media day preview. We'll talk about some of the things that happen. And then after media day on Thursday, I will do a podcast as well, either on that Thursday or Friday. And we'll be getting up to 3 episodes a week over the course of these next few weeks. Got some fun things planned. Got some exciting news planned. Should be a lot of fun. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button on the way out. I will talk to you guys